it's so interesting. So many schools had their early action or early decision deadlines on Sunday and extended it because they didn't get their numbers, because families couldn't go ahead and get, they just don't, people can't make decisions to decide they're going to apply early decision to schools they've never seen. They haven't had testing. They need the testing because sometimes they need a merit scholarship and they still tie that to testing. So it's been interesting to see some of the schools be like, we'll extend this for another 15 days. And, not saying why, but we all know why.
Sure.
They're not meeting their numbers, and dealing with, kids in Florida who, the state of Florida is the only state in the country that has not eliminated testing as a requirement to get into the university system. So you have kids who have had canceled tests 5 or 6 times and need to stay in state because they have bright futures, which they'll get free tuition, but they can't test. So it's just a nightmare down there, but I'm okay.
Yeah. You're
having fun.
Yeah, I know. We're like that. Give us the biggest problems. We're good. We're
fine.
All right. Well, let's kick this off, shall we?
Okay. Perfect.
I want to just say to all of those who are participating tonight, if you do have, this is for you. So if you have a question for Dana, if you have a question for me, anything that you would like to know tonight about college admissions, please ask. Dana is like a wealth of information. I was so excited for tonight, just because I get to be in the room with her for an hour. I will 100% walk out of here with more knowledge than I came in with. So you guys are in for a real treat. And I say that with like all of the truth, really.
Thank you.
And so if you want, you could certainly submit, in the chat, just where you are coming from, just like how old your children are, just so Dana knows where to gear this towards, just if you're a 10th grade parent, 9th grade parent, 11th grade parent, or even a 12th grade parent, just let us know a little bit more about where you're coming from, and we'll be happy to gear things towards you. I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A all evening as we go along. Feel free. Also, if you need to pop out and check the polls and look at things and you miss something, just so you know, we are taping this and it will be on our YouTube channel at a later time. So you can definitely go there and check it out. But you can also find Dana through me or through her practice. We work together often. I refer to her often, and she has a wonderful practice to help families. So you can certainly also follow up with her as well. So we're just getting some information in here. We have 9th grade parents coming in. So if anyone else wants to chime in and give me their children's ages, I will just shout them out. So we have 10th grade parents, and I know some other people on here. So we've got some mostly 9th and 10th grade I see here. So maybe an 11th grade parent as well. So just, certainly as you come in, just make sure you let us know how old your children are, and we will be happy to gear this all towards you. All right, we're going to get started. So I'm just going to quickly say, if it's all right, Dana, that
go do your thing.
I'm my little intro. I'm Mary Mealy, and I'm the founder of Evolved Education, and we present these webinar series as part of our mission to ensure that students learn well. We want to make sure that families are armed with resources, first and foremost, to support their children through school, and part of that work comes from offering information and resources that we think will really help our families to be informed, to really think of their child in the process of supporting them in school. So we offer 3 services. We have one-to-one tutoring, SAT and ACT tutoring prep included. And we also have parent education consulting. So that means that we will tutor you, the parent, in anything that you need to learn about. And we also offer school placement advisement and consulting through high school. And then we hand things off to Dana for college. So this is sort of a nice partnership that we have. She's really the expert, and I'm so excited to turn things over to her. I will be not talking that much. I might interject a question as I see it coming through, but this is really Dana's night. So thanks for listening, and we will let Dana have the floor.
Thank you, Mary. So I was just going to actually say that I hope that I can provide a lot of entertainment as a good filler for the next for the next hour at least, while some of us sit on pins and needles as to what's going to happen tonight. So I'm your evening entertainment instead of MSNBC, CNN, Fox, ABC, whatever. So one of the things I want to just say before we start, at any point, feel free to, I always say, interrupt the conversation with questions. I have no problem if Mary goes ahead and and asks me questions while I'm talking. So if you have anything that pops up while I'm on a specific slide, or if I'm saying something, I'll do my best to try to answer it as we go along, but we'll definitely have time at the end to answer questions. So like Mary said, my name is Dana Ponsky. I'm a independent college counselor. I own Dana Ponsky Consulting Services, and I'm your guide to college. My goal is to help families navigate the college admissions process with a lot less stress. We know that it's a stressful process for everybody involved. It takes a village to get students through the college admissions process, but I work really hard to work with students to try to take something that's stressful and make it stress less. So starting off, if my internet works, there we go. So, just wanted to give an overview for tonight. We're just going to do a quick, just getting to know one another. This is the opportunity. Some of you have already shared, grades that your students are in, where they're in. I actually think I recognize a name on here. So just getting to know one another so I can give you a background about myself. I'm going to talk a little bit about important factors in the college admissions landscape, presented by kind of what universities are telling people, on my side of the desk. And then I'm just going to talk about a roadmap to follow. So for students that are in grades 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, what you should be expecting of your student in each grade and what to work through as you go along the road towards college. And then finally, we'll just do a question and answer part of this. And so it gives everybody the opportunity to just take any random questions. I'm good with anything. I'm the holder of the world's most useless information. So if you've got good Jeopardy questions, I'm fine with that too. So feel free just to go ahead and ask any questions during, or we'll have plenty of time at the end. So just to give a little bit of a background about who I am, I have been working as a college counselor, well, not as a college counselor if I think about it. I've been working in education for the last 20 years. First, I was in post-secondary education on the university side. I served 9 years as a university administrator at schools like the University of Michigan, the University of Miami, Barry University. And my job functions started off as I was a trained career counselor, but then I eventually transitioned over to first year programming. So specifically helping students who had accepted their place at the university and ensuring they actually made it through their freshman year of college. I was the retention officer at Barry University. So my goal was to keep students in school. And if they didn't stay in school, I tried to find out why it was they left. And one of the things I learned in that process was there were a lot of students who weren't making it through their first year of school. And I wondered why. And, I could only do so much, but I wanted to know what was happening when they were in high school. And I had learned about this great job that people had called college counseling. I did not have a college counselor when I was in high school. I did it on my own. And so I learned of this great job. And so about 11 years ago, I transitioned over from the university side to the high school side. And I became a school-based college counselor. And I've been doing that for the last 11 years, and I absolutely love my job. So while I've been working at school, I've also been very slowly developing my role as an independent college counselor, working with families outside of the school setting. So now I do kind of like a little bit of full-time of both. I work in a school, in the private school setting right now, helping a new school create their first college counseling office. And I have a full college counseling business that I have. And I do, I work with some companies just to help them with, clients. And then I also have clients. Most of my clients actually are outside of New York City. Just by virtue, I have students in Florida. I have students that are actually as far as Colombia and South Africa. But my goal is really just to be a college counselor. I love it. It's a great job. One of the things that I wanted to mention in terms of my role is that I am a professional member of 3 organizations: NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counseling; IECA, which is the Independent Educational Consultants Association; and HECA, which is the Higher Education Consultants Association. And I think it's important to mention my memberships in these organizations because these are the organizations that kind of manage the ethical and strict standards of people who are in my profession of college counseling. So there are a lot of people who could be college counselors, but I think it's really important to kind of maintain membership in these organizations that, have a standard of practice that's very high, that there's a lot of requirements to be a member of these associations, but it helps not only just keep everybody kind of on a making sure everyone's doing what they need to do, but also it's an amazing resource for me. It's how I connect to other university administrators in admissions and in financial aid, as well as other people who are doing the work similar to what I do and what Mary does, which I think is helping enhance the field altogether. So I use the standards and the practices and the ethical practices that are available to us as counselors through these organizations I use to help guide me through my work as a counselor. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about tonight were something that was created by the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, NACAC. And it's basically, they went ahead and did something what they call the Admissions Trend Survey. And each year they go ahead and they ask college admissions counselors throughout the country what factors they deem to be important in the college admissions process for first-time freshmen. And so you'll see that there's a long list going on right here. And so from the top factor that you'll notice where it has the highest level of considerable importance are grades in all courses, grades in college prep courses, and strength of curriculum. And then you'll notice admissions test scores, which we'll talk about. That's all I have to say. It's just a beast, the admission test scores. But you'll also start seeing things like essays and students' demonstrated interest, recommendations, activities, interviews, work. So there's a lot of different factors that colleges throughout the country use in terms of when they're considering students. And so I think it's really important for us to talk about just some of these. And so what I have found over the course of my career is that grades do matter. They do matter the most. It's kind of what is guiding students in terms of being able to ensure that they're getting the background that they need to be successful in college. I'm also finding that demonstrated interest is also another really important factor in the admissions process, sometimes less for a university, but always for the benefit of a student. So the student giving them the opportunity to learn about that institution can be really great, not just for the student to learn, but also can build a relationship with the university that can be advantageous to the admissions process. And then another area that I wanted to talk about that I'm going to talk about is extracurricular activities. And the extracurricular activities is what your student is doing outside of school. This has been, to me, plays a much bigger role than it actually falls kind of on this list. You'll notice it actually falls pretty low, but if you do notice, almost 43% of the those surveyed listed as moderately important. So while it seems to be lower on the list, it actually does have a large level of importance to many schools. And so I do think it's important to talk about that, because as things are starting to evolve, especially in the last few months with college admissions, I think extracurricular activities and participation is going to matter significantly in the process for college admissions moving forward. So starting off, I wanted to talk about grades. So grades are something that, you know, a student is not defined by their grade. I always tell my students, you are not defined as a person by grades, by two numbers, by what you have in a class, and a percentage. You know, you're 99% in the class doesn't dictate who you are, and neither does an SAT score. These are not numbers that dictate, you know, the personality of our students, but they are important. They do show a lot of very important information to the college admissions staff that basically indicates whether or not your student has demonstrated that they're going to be able to be successful on the college campus. And so grades from 9th through 12th grade are going to show a comprehension of and a mastery of knowledge. And this is going to be incredibly important to universities, because they're going to go ahead and basically say, tell us how you have been able to show us, or tell or show us how you comprehend the information. Oftentimes that's by doing well on tests and quizzes and papers. And that not only that you know the information, but that you've mastered it. And sometimes the mastery of that information comes when you've gone ahead and you've decided to take, we'll just use like pre-calculus as a math class, and then you've chosen to take calculus as your next level, because you're going ahead and you're consistently trying to grow within a particular area and gain even more mastery of a particular subject. Your grades are also a demonstration, which I left the N out of demonstration. You know, it's 2020 when I start making spelling errors. So demonstration of skills development. And skills are an important part, not just from an academic point of view, but they're also really an important part of what we're going to be seeing for students in terms of their vocational training. You want them to not just develop knowledge, but you want them to also develop skills. And the grades that they earn from their classes are showing that they have writing skills, they have deductive reasoning skills, problem solving skills. These are all part of the grades in which they are going ahead and that they're earning. And also grades do play an important part in showing to a college the level of effort a student puts in, as well as their work ethic. Colleges do not expect students to be perfect, but they do expect students to have worked, to have shown in some way that they've worked hard to try to earn their grades. And if your student is working really, really hard and they've got an 85 average in a class and they've done everything they could be doing and they do comprehend the information and they have demonstrated their abilities to gain skills and they're showing their work ethic and it gets them an 85, that's a fantastic 85. And we want to encourage our students to understand that their grades should be a combination of all of these three things. The other aspect of grades that is important to understand is called strength of curriculum and rigor. And this is where grades matter, but then you can go ahead and you'll notice the strength of curriculum and rigor changes from school to school. One thing that's very important for families and students to understand is that you're only being compared against the students from your school, and you're being put into context of your school. You're not being compared to how another school performs. It's just not possible to do that. Even within the New York City public school system, all these schools have basic requirements that they need to have in order to be able to graduate from high school, but many of them go above and beyond. Some go way above and beyond. Other ones, might just keep more to whatever the requirements are for the high school diploma. So when you're talking about strength of curriculum and rigor, what you're trying to do is make sure that the student is showing that they've taken college preparatory courses, honors classes where appropriate, AP courses if they're available, IB, dual enrollment, Cambridge. These are all different types of programs that schools can have, whether they're public or private. And so it's important that your student, in most cases, every student participates in a college preparatory curriculum. But if you have a student who really struggles in a subject and might be in a foundational class, and they're in foundations English in 9th grade because they've struggled with reading comprehension, but they move up to college prep in 10th, that's showing a sense of rigor to their schedule. And it's showing that they're working really hard to try to increase that rigor and show that there is strength to their curriculum to prepare them for the college process.
There's
go ahead.
A quick question, Dana. It's how do the colleges or universities recognize the fantastic 85?
So essentially what happens is there's two parts to the college application process that the high school itself contributes to. And that's done in two ways. One is done in what's called the school profile. Every student goes ahead and submits a transcript will be submitted on their behalf by their school, and that will be coupled with what's known as a school profile. The school profile is created by the college counselor or administrators at the school that explains to the college what that high school is all about, talks about their demographics, talks about their curriculum, the strength of their curriculum, the rigor that's available to students. And then what they do is they also have counselor letters of recommendation. So what happens is, and teacher recommendations, what happens is that for the schools, many schools require these letters of recommendation. It gives the opportunity for teachers to talk about a student and how well they've performed in their class, but it also gives a counselor the opportunity to go ahead and talk about a student in the context of their school, but also on a broader level, that if you do have a student who's got that 85 and has worked so hard for that, it could be mentioned both by the teacher as to how much progress and demonstration of skills and mastery, but then it can also be supported by the school counselor as well. So you have multiple entities from the school end that can support the narrative that that student is trying to convey in other parts of their application. Okay.
I love that. I just want to interject one thing, because I work with the high school kids and I'm always trying to tell them that your process matters, because it does matter in general, but it matters also because people notice, and people notice when you give your extra effort and when you're really putting yourself at risk, when you're putting yourself in a position that may feel uncomfortable. These are all fantastic qualities that are just as important as the number grade you get. Because if, let's say, you stay in a very safe space and you get all A's, you get a 4.0, but you never were that kid that put yourself out there or tried something or failed or had a hard time with something, and you don't have anything to talk about really, it's certainly, I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I really think it's really something important, that I don't think kids really understand that, though. I think they see the grades as something really concrete. They understand that, right? Like, I have to get an A or I'm not getting into college. So I think it's a good message to counter as the adults in the room to say, actually, yeah.
Right. And that's something that's important. Also, a lot of my students will say to me, I'm not doing well in the class. The teacher doesn't like me. How well you do in a class has nothing to do with your relationship with your teacher. Teachers want to see effort in terms of building the relationship with them. So I oftentimes will tell a story. I had a coworker once who said, if a kid is failing in my class, he's less likely to fail if he comes to me every day and works on the relationship with me, because I want to see how hard he's trying to work or how hard she's trying to work or they're trying to work. And I think that was really important, because I used to say to my students, it's okay that you're not doing well. Go to this teacher. She will sit with you and she will try to help you. And she goes, at the end of the day, if a kid is consistent, usually a student who's not doing well, who consistently sees her, is no longer not doing well. They suddenly find a huge increase in their grades. And so I think that's really important, is that, like, if you have a student who's achieved that 85 after so much hard work, that's the teacher recommendation you want, is the teacher that you've made a really close relationship, who can talk about your growth and development in the classes. And it's not always the teacher where you got 100 in the class. Sometimes that teacher doesn't have much to say. It's the ones where you've struggled the most. Those teachers are always the happiest to write. And so I just wanted to continue along, just making one comment. When I wrote at the bottom, understanding minimum versus maximum credits, this is something that I just want to kind of convey to families, that there is a minimum requirement to graduate from high school in New York and in every state in the country. And then there's going above and beyond that. When you're walking into a school, make sure you understand not just what the requirements are to graduate from the school, but whether or not you're choosing to go above and beyond what's expected. Because oftentimes those are two different things, and colleges tie in your willingness to go above and beyond in terms of giving you kind of credit for your rigor and strength of the curriculum that you're choosing to follow. Oops, there we go. Okay. Oh, it just bounced. There we go. So I wanted to talk now about extracurricular activities. So in this particular case, extracurricular activities for me is important, like I mentioned, because we do have students now who, especially this year, who don't have testing available to them to be able to go ahead and talk about, even more how they do academically. So colleges really want to see students beyond just the numbers, and extracurricular activities are the way to do that. And so oftentimes we have to talk to students about the quality of their extracurricular activities versus the quantity. There's this idea that the more extracurriculars that they do, the better. That's not necessarily the case. Colleges want to see commitment. Commitment is the biggest word. And so sometimes if you have a student who's starting in 9th grade and is joining an investments club, and it's a popular organization, stay connected and committed to that organization through the 4 years that you're in high school. Potentially get a leadership role. Start taking on different activities that are related to the investment club, maybe taking a dual enrollment class or a summer program course on investments. Grow with whatever it is that you're choosing to do, and enhance upon those areas that you find most interesting. So when I mention things like depth versus breadth, depth is really going to kind of connect to the quality of the experience. And so the depth becomes 9th grade, you join an investment club, you really like it. Going into 10th grade, you participate in an investments kind of a game. There were quite a few virtual competitions that took place over the summer. Some kids like to go to camp between 9th and 10th grade. I think that's fine, because to me, the summer months are about rest and relaxation. And so if you're going to include that, you can still go ahead and expose yourself to an area that you might find interesting, like investing. And then maybe in 10th grade, looking at classes like okay, I want to make sure my math class is the right math class because I think I want to get to calculus by the time that I'm a senior. And what do I need to do in terms of math? And then making sure you remain a member in the investments club. Then thinking about summer programs. Maybe it could be a college summer program where you're taking business courses and getting a wider variety of understanding about investing. So there's just a lot of different ways that you can grow with things. And so that's what I think colleges are looking for, is the depth that can go with the experience that you're having. And I think it's really important also to understand that the reason that colleges really like extracurricular activities is that it's an opportunity for character development. You can gain the opportunity to be a member of an organization where you're not just a party of one. You have the opportunity to have leadership skill development, ability to work on projects together. It shows commitment, which is a huge part of character. It shows the commitment, the dedication, the motivation to want to participate when time is so, limited, but also and valuable, that you are prioritizing things. And so I think colleges are really like that aspect of the extracurricular part. And I think that we want our students to be more than just numbers. And we want to be able to use their extracurricular activities to really present who they are as people. They are not just these one type of person, and we want to use the opportunity for them to get involved to really become more confident in who they are as people. And also, at the end of the day, extracurricular activities all go on a resume, and the resume your student develops in high school is the resume that that same document, they'll just keep evolving and evolving and evolving over time. I have students who are 10 years out of high school who will tell me they use the exact same Microsoft Word document that we created when they were in 11th grade. And I think that's really helpful, is that you want these extracurricular activities to be on that resume, because somebody's going to ask, for a resume, maybe when they're trying to go get a job, or maybe when they're trying to do a summer program and they need a school's going to say, tell us what you do. What are your extracurriculars? Show it to us on a resume. And I think that we want to give our students the opportunity to have something. It doesn't need to be 2-3 pages long, but we want to be able to have something that's going to be robust in nature. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. They don't all have, you can have academic extracurriculars, sports, theater. Community service is a hugely valuable extracurricular activity that colleges really do like to see. They do want to know where you volunteered your time, to be able to kind of enhance not only yourself, but the community around you, because typically community service has a lot of high value at universities themselves. Oh, Mary, you're on mute.
I'm muted.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Start all over.
Starting over. I have a few questions, so I just want to
Okay.
get a few of them. Thank you. I'm glad you could see me. Okay.
Yes, I'm like.
So, okay. First question is, great question. How do you guide a child who could stay in honors but struggles, there with a less impressive grade, or step down to a regular class and achieve a better grade, and also open up the student's time to explore extracurriculars? What would you advise in that situation?
Well, I think it's probably the most important thing is to focus on each individual class and not clump together all the classes. So oftentimes students will say, I'm in all honors and it's really hard and I'm having trouble focusing, or I'm not doing as well in all my classes. And maybe instead of focusing on making sure all the classes are honors classes or all AP classes, just kind of put a pause and say, do I need to be in honors English when I'm not really sure I love the subject, but I really like math and I want to maybe challenge myself there? So kind of picking and choosing the classes. If you're sitting in a class and you're just struggling and struggling and struggling and it's taking too much time away, I will oftentimes sit down with the student, look them straight in the face and say, how do you feel about this? And, a lot of times kids will break down and just say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I am perfectly okay with that. Then there's the students that sit there and just say, I really want to keep trying. The challenge, I'm up for the challenge. And I think that's what we have to look at. We can't focus on the number that's associated with the class. We have to focus on how they feel about the experience. And if you have a student who's enjoying the challenge and wants to keep going, then keep going and figure out what support mechanisms need to be put in place to ensure their continued success. Or if they're really struggling and there's tears and there's just stress and anxiety, that's the point where I'd say, you know what, this isn't worth it. Because to me, a student should be enjoying high school for it being a high school experience, not because it's a means to an end to get into college. And so if at that point you're too stressed out in class and it's not working out and it's taking away from family time, friend time, self-care time, and extracurricular activities, which are also an important part, that's when I say, break down each class and recognize whether or not it has to be all your classes or it can be maybe some of them, and work with the school counselor or an independent counselor to just try to help, navigate that. But I think that that's the most important question, is don't look at the number, look at their social emotional well-being at that point.
Really good point. When do you start with summer college programs?
You can start with them as in ninth grade. So you can do it, I have some students who will do them every summer. They'll go to different colleges. They'll spend, 1 week at one. Sometimes they'll spend 3 weeks the next summer, and sometimes they'll spend an entire month, or longer, going into their 12th grade year. You can kind of decide at any point you want to do it. I usually say to families to start looking in December and January of whether it's 9th, 10th, or 11th grade. And I would suggest looking at programs that are going to be academically interesting, but also career interest driven. So if they're really loving math, find programs that are that have to do with math. But if your student is saying that they're really interested in being a teacher, find opportunities or summer programs that are going to expose them to working with a population of people that they're interested in working with in the future, whether it's young children, whether it happens to be teenagers, and doing some kind of tutoring program. There's just a lot of ways to do it. And I think that the summer is actually a really good time to enhance upon academic experiences, but even a better opportunity to explore career interests. So I would say December and January is probably the best time to begin that process.
It's also really fun to talk with kids who've done summer programs, because they usually, going into their college process, I don't know how it is with your students, but they do tend to decide a little bit better, I think, as terms of like what they really want to be doing versus what they don't want to be doing, because they've maybe been in a college environment and they're like, I really hated being there, or I really loved being there, or I just really love taking those kinds of classes, or I didn't like taking those kinds of classes. They actually have something to go on. Otherwise, it feels a little abstract sometimes. So I think it's really helpful to do summer college program for those reasons, but certainly going off what a child wants to be exploring, of course, as well. Yeah.
I will say, if your student is interested in subjects like engineering or architecture, those are summer programs going into between 10th and 11th, and definitely between 11th and 12th. I highly recommend, if they're not getting exposure to any engineering or architecture related courses, such as CAD, such as introduction to engineering, and or may not have exposure to higher level physics courses, I would highly recommend participating in those summer programs. A lot of colleges want to see that a student who wants to go into engineering has a strong understanding of what it is prior to them deciding to go in. And that's actually, I'm working with a student right now who had intended to participate in engineering programs this past summer going into 12th grade, and has actually made the decision he wants to be an engineer, but because he didn't get the opportunity to explore what engineering is in different areas, he's chosen to go in undecided to the universities because he didn't get that chance and he doesn't have an opportunity in school. And so I think that, and I've always kind of promoted that, but even more so now, if your school doesn't provide those kind of areas, definitely go ahead and use the summer programs to explore that. And if they love it, great. And if they don't love it, great. It's fine. Yeah. They'll move on to something else.
Yeah, really. You kind of like get to low stakes experimentation. Yeah.
Not when a student doesn't know what they like, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
I agree. How do kids having jobs versus extracurricular activities or clubs impact applications?
jobs are seen very high, are seen very positively by universities, because it's obviously, working is not easy, as many of us, and we all know. So they like to see that students are working because they are, required. They usually have a boss. They have to show up on time. Just by virtue of having a job tells colleges that there's certain levels of responsibility that they're gaining. There's a real world understanding. Oftentimes the work that high schoolers are doing has a lot of customer service related to it. So there's the ability to understand how to work with other people and how to serve other people. So it's really seen quite valuably. One of the challenges, though, is that one of the most underemployed groups of people in the United States are teenagers. It used to be very different, that if you were 16 years old, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was pretty easy to find a job when you were in high school. It is not the same now. So a lot of places, well, in New York City, students can get working papers. It's still difficult to try to find a job. And oftentimes, they're working shifts that are kind of at odd hours. I've had students who are working from 6 o'clock at night till 11:30, 12 o'clock. They're going to school till, and they get up in the morning and then they go to school till 2. They only have 3 or 4 hours. So it's a little bit more challenging these days, but there's definitely opportunities out there. And I encourage students to take advantage of it if that's something that they're interested in or that they need to do to help with the support of the family. One of the things is many colleges will ask, if you are working, are you doing it to contribute to your family's, well-being, as that's an important factor, for many people.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. All right, we're good with the questions for the moment, but please keep them coming. We really want to make sure all your questions are answered. If something wasn't answered fully, we really don't mind circling back. So please go ahead and put them in the Q&A as we go forward. Perfect. I hope everyone's doing okay. We are recording this, so if you miss anything because you're popping in and out, it's totally fine. We'll get you later, and we'll carry on. Thanks, Dina.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. All right, let me go back at this. Okay, perfect. All right, so I just wanted to quickly mention demonstrated interest. I talked about this a little bit earlier. So demonstrated interest is something that has been very challenging to convey in the last year, but it is an important part, and I think will continually be important to some schools. Typically, demonstrated interest works for smaller liberal arts colleges. They tend to take a lot more stock in demonstrated interest than your state universities or Ivy Leagues, for example, who get tons of applications and essentially don't have to market, students in terms of admissions processes. But demonstrated interest is not for just the benefit of the university, and it's not just for the benefit of getting in, but it's for the benefit of understanding the college process from start to finish and understanding that there are 3,000 schools in this country and every one of them is different. You're very rarely not going to find ones where you're like, that one's just like the same as that one. It doesn't work like that. And so what our goal is through demonstrated interest is to give a student the opportunity to be able to really get a sense and a feeling of what the colleges have to offer and have to offer them. And it's not just, can a student get in, but what is the university going to do for the student? So demonstrated interest can be done through campus tours. There are tours, they were fully canceled before. You couldn't do that. There are more and more schools that are doing in-person visits now. I tell families, if you're going on a family trip, we used to do that. Don't know when we're going to do that, like normal. But when you used to go on a family trip, I would say to people, heck, you're flying to Montana? Great. When you land and you happen to be driving to some random town and there's a university, stop at the university. I don't care if your kid's in 5th grade, just do it, because students will remember when they stop at universities. Even, when you're walking down the street somewhere in New York City and you happen to, walk by Marymount Manhattan, stop for a second, look around, you'll start seeing signs, just see what the buildings look like. You don't even have to necessarily go in, just take a look at the lay of the land, so to speak. The other part that's really helpful with demonstrated interest is college representative visits. College representatives from schools all over the country love to visit high schools. And so each year, high schools are bringing in anywhere between 30 to 40 different reps for small schools, up to 200 different college and university representatives for larger schools. This is an opportunity for your student to sit with a college representative and learn from that particular representative what that school is all about. Sometimes those meetings have a lot of students, sometimes they have very small numbers. It's really a great opportunity for that admissions counselor who's trying to do some marketing with the school and is interested in what is interested in the student body is there also to kind of help students understand the process for their university and in their admissions process, but also just college admissions in general. So I would always say it's really important. Most high schools wait until 11th grade to allow their students to participate. But if your school allows, ninth graders or 10th graders, I highly recommend that they participate. Information sessions, they used to be very tied into campus tours. You could go to a university, do an information session, and then go on a tour. You'd learn all about, different programs the university had that they wanted to highlight. But now they do them all virtually, and it's a really great opportunity. You simply can go to a university's website. If you have just any university you want to choose, you can go ahead, see when they're doing a presentation. Sometimes now they're doing them multiple times a week. They'll have evening programs. It's a really great opportunity to understand. It's about an hour, and they'll talk all about, programs that they're really proud of, and then they'll talk about their admissions process. And oftentimes during the application process later on, they'll say, how did you learn about us? You can put your participation in information sessions on there. Pre-college programs, like we talked about over the summer, that can be very helpful, because even though, it's not often that if you go to, if you go to Harvard for a summer program, it's not going to matter for the admissions process. But if you've gone to a smaller school, you really enjoyed their pre-college program, and you decide to apply to a university, they're going to take notice of the fact that you had come to a pre-college program. And demonstrated interest through legacy. Legacy plays a very minimal role. I think the news makes it seem like it plays a huge role, but it's quite minimal in the process of college admissions. But if you are a student who is legacy for a parent that has previously gone to that university, or a grandparent or a sibling, and you have showed that school that you're still really interested in them, connecting through legacy can be helpful at some institutions. It's, like I said, more and more schools are working away from that, but there are still schools out there that on their admissions websites will mention legacy, and that's shown as a particular form of demonstrated interest. Okay, so, I don't know why I keep pressing and then it goes like that. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just kind of highlight different roadmaps for each of the grades. So we'll just kind of quickly go through this. In terms of the ninth grade roadmap, one of the things that's the most important for your students to do when they're in ninth grade is earn and then maintain strong grades. Strong grades, like I said before, is student specific. It's not, you need 100, you need an A. If your student was formerly not doing so well in middle school and is now in ninth grade, remember, they're going through major transitioning. And if they're earning a low B average, that's wonderful, because they're going through a significant life transition at the same time that they're trying to figure out what is this high school thing, and they're trying to figure out grades and waking up earlier than they're used to. There's a whole lot of stuff they have to deal with. So it's really more about figuring out how to earn the grades that are going to be a good representation of who they are and their effort and their intellect, and also teaching them and working with them to maintain those grades. Having your ninth grader understand the school's curriculum is really important. Oftentimes I'll have students say to me, and going into 11th grade, they'll be like, oh, I took 2 years of a foreign language and I'm done after this year. And I'm always like, yes, your school says that that's all that you're going to need to graduate from that school, but we also want to make sure that you're going to be able to get into such and such college. Maybe we need to go above and beyond. And what does your school allow for us to be able to do that? So understanding the school's curriculum, how much English, math, science, social studies, foreign language do you need in order to be able to not just graduate, but to go above and beyond? For ninth graders, it's also really important to connect with teachers, the support staff, have them meet with their school counselor. If there is a college counselor, usually they don't have college counselors meet with ninth graders. I'm not a big fan. I think let ninth graders just focus on high school. But the support staff that's available, if your student has any learning differences or learning needs, this is a great time to make sure that the educational support staff, that you're really getting to know and connect with that. Coaches for different, whether it's academic coaches, sports coaches, theater instructors, and then just different mentors that are within the school. Making connections with all those people. It takes a village, like I said earlier. We want to keep moving them along with a lot of people in that village. We talked about getting involved and making summer plans. Start thinking about 1 or 2 activities, after school. If it's a sport, keep going with the sport. Right now, obviously, sporting events are a little more difficult, but schools are coming up with really creative ways of doing extracurricular activities and clubs. Have your student just find 1 or 2 that they find interesting and have them just be involved. If they're in it and they're not enjoying it, I'm not a big fan of continuing along things that you don't enjoy. Find another club to replace it. And I think this is a really good time to teach your student to understand who they are and what their likes, their dislikes, their strengths, their limitations are. Knowing all of these factors about who a student is very important, because it's going to help determine later on, I like this subject. I don't know if I like that subject that much. I really like, the idea of working with my hands, but I hate the idea of sitting behind a desk all the time. These are things that are going to be really important, because later on, a student's going to be sitting with me and I'm going to ask a question and I'm going to say, in a perfect world that you don't live in, what does your perfect life look like? What do you love to do? What do you not like to do? And if I could have a quarter for the amount of times I've heard, I don't know, I would be a very, very, very wealthy woman. So my goal is to make sure that students do know the answers to these questions. Otherwise, I should probably start collecting on my, I don't know, after all of these years. Okay, and in terms of, 10th grade. 10th grade is going to be very consistent with 9th grade, except for continuing with maintaining your strong grades. But this is where I would say to families, begin the idea of preparing for the SATs or ACTs. While I haven't spoken a lot about testing, and the reason I haven't spoken a lot about testing tonight has more to do with the fact that we just don't know what testing is going to look like over the next year, especially in the next couple of years. Right now, the University of California system is no longer allowed to use test scores in their admissions process. There's been a court decision that has eliminated their use starting this year. And so that's one of the largest state university systems in the country. And if they're saying that the SAT and ACT can no longer be used as part of an admissions process because it's not a good indication of a student's success, many other schools are going to follow. Currently, there are, like I said, 3,000 schools in this country. Over 2,000 of them right now are called test optional, partially because of our situation. But there are many schools that over the last few years have decided that test scores are not an important part of the college admissions process. But the reality is there are still universities out there that do consider it. It can be used for merit scholarship purposes. And so I do think that it's important that we go ahead and talk about how your student can begin preparing for the SAT and ACT. I know I've gone ahead and suggested people go to Mary and her staff who have, she's got some great people on her staff who do SAT, ACT preparation that work with students. And I talk to students a lot about, things that they could be doing on their own. There's opportunities like, if your student is not an avid reader, which many high schoolers are not, they have a little hard time finding the time, I would say find a periodical, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, have your students start reading on a regular basis, just 1 article a day. It's going to expose them to higher levels of writing. It's going to expose them to words they've not potentially heard before, and it keeps them kind of in the loop of current events. These are things that are super helpful later on for testing purposes. But I would say that in 10th grade, many schools will do the PSAT, which is it's like a practice SAT or a preliminary SAT. This is a good opportunity to start getting exposure to these tests. But I would say that you really should start studying for the SATs this summer, going into 11th grade, and then finding time throughout 11th grade to determine a schedule that's going to work best for you and your future goals. And then the rest of this is, strengthening relationships with teachers and mentors, staying involved, and using 10th grade to take what you like and dislike and exploring career interests even further. And you can do that through your involvement or summer programs, or starting to think about classes for 11th grade that are going to help with that career exploration. Is there a question?
There is. Can you elaborate on SAT subject tests? I heard they start after 9th grade.
So one of the things that So SAT subject tests, for those who don't know, are 1-hour tests that focus on just a specific subject. So you have English literature, US history, world history, biology, chemistry, there's some foreign languages. So they kind of like run the gamut of kind of the main course subjects. It is important to know that there are not very many schools in the United States that even consider using the SAT subject tests anymore. There's about 100 that will take them and will use them in consideration. At this point, there are no universities that require the SAT subject test anymore. After this year, the 5 stalwarts are no longer on the list. So some schools will recommend it if you haven't gone ahead and maybe done AP classes or IB curriculum. They might say take a subject test instead. But I would say if your student is sitting in an honors level course in 9th grade and they've really done very strongly in an honors level course and they want to sit for a subject test, they can. Usually what I would say to a student is if you're in an AP course in 10th or 11th grade, go ahead and when you're studying for your AP exam, which takes place in early May, sit for the subject test in the same subject. So if you're in AP US history, take the subject test in US history at the same time in May, because you're killing 2 birds with the same stone. The AP is harder than the subject test. So if you're studying for the AP to potentially earn college credit, just go ahead and sit and take the subject test. If you do really well, you could potentially use that to your benefit later on. But most students don't, I don't have very many students who participate in the subject test program anymore.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so for 11th grade, again, you'll see a lot of things that are similar to what we talked about before: maintaining grades, SAT, ACT, APs, subject tests. Make a plan. Every student is different. My recommendation is do not follow a collective decision-making about this. Talk to the school counselor to come up with a plan that's good for your student. If your student is in Algebra 2 as an 11th grader, I would recommend that student wait until the latter part of 11th grade to sit and take SAT or ACT, because they'll need the content knowledge to be able to master kind of that part of the exam. If you take it in early 11th grade without ever being exposed to the subject, you tend not to do so well in math. So every student is different in this realm, but making a plan is going to it's going to work for everybody to make an individualized one. Stay engaged, explore leadership opportunities, exploring career options. And then on the bottom, I'll talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. Like I said before, building those relationships with counselors and mentors and teachers early on is now going to be the time where colleges are going to say, we need 2 teachers' letters of recommendation. Now you go to those teachers and say, I worked really hard in your class. Would you mind writing me that letter? And this is the point that you ask them to do that, is in the latter half of 11th grade. Also, make sure that you're scheduling time to meet with the school counselor. So I'm of the mindset, partially because this is, I've been a school counselor for a school-based college counselor for so long, but if you have support outside of school, the support that is being provided to you with an independent college counselor should be a complement to what is happening in school. It shouldn't be a replacement for what's happening in school. Your school-based college counselor is going to be the person that your student has to have a relationship with, because you have to follow the school's policies and procedures to ensure that your applications are going to be submitted properly. That person who's the school-based college counselor is also writing your student's letter of recommendation. You can't get around that. And so you need to make sure that your student is developing that relationship with the counselor, especially in 11th grade when they say, make a meeting with us, make a meeting with them. And if you have support outside of the class, outside of school, with somebody like me who does this, I will encourage you continually saying, have you met with your school counselor? Have you met with your school counselor? And while I'm not necessarily the person communicating with them, I want to make sure that that relationship is being built, because that's what's going to be beneficial for the student and beneficial for the school, to make sure that everybody's working kind of in tandem. And then also, like I mentioned earlier with demonstrated interest, use the 11th grade year to start visiting and participate in any college programs that are going to be available.
So another question, yes. Are there any restrictions on the teacher recommendations? For example, only 11th or 12th grade can provide such a recommendation?
So oftentimes I'll suggest that students first focus on their 11th grade teachers because they're the ones that they have had within that particular year. But if a student has a teacher that they've had maybe more than one time, which oftentimes can happen in smaller schools, or a teacher that they had such an amazing relationship with in, let's just say, I'm going to say more 10th grade, they've had a really great relationship and if that student has shown a lot of progress between ninth and 10th grade, and that 10th grade instructor can speak really well for the student, I don't think there's a problem including a 10th grade teacher. But most of the time students are finding that their 11th grade instructors are the ones that will write. 12th grade teachers typically don't write for students because they haven't had them for very long. They've only had them for about a month and a half before the applications are due. So usually it's the 11th grade teachers, and then sometimes 10th graders as well. And it's always, there's no problem with having your 2 teacher recommendations and also having a third one in kind of like the back pocket. The student is never going to see these letters. They're going to be housed by the school. You don't have rights to see them. You have to waive them. Otherwise, it looks suspect to the universities. But having that extra recommendation from a 10th grade teacher or even a 9th grade teacher is good to have in case there's schools that are really saying, we'll be happy to take a third letter. Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So in terms of 12th grade, like I said before, meet with your school-based counselor. You should be developing and finalizing a comprehensive college list. You want to do this, I would recommend by the beginning of September at the latest. This is so to partially reduce the stress of your student. So in terms of when you're meeting with school-based counselors, if you're struggling to find time to meet with them because they're so stretched out or they don't have enough bandwidth to meet with students on more than one or 2 times, every school has systems that are in place. There's something called Naviance or Score or Maya Learning, which are these online college platforms. This is a great opportunity for students to be able to work with the school counselor using one of those systems to help build a college list. If you work with an independent counselor, that's another opportunity. Usually that's a much easier process for some students because you're going to kind of go back and forth to develop a college list that's going to be comprehensive in nature. And you want that comprehensive list to have a couple of reach options, but a majority of the schools that you should be applying to, your students should reflect what I call the middle 50% of accepted students. So if your students' grades are a 3.5 GPA and a 1250 SAT, you're going to want to look for schools that's the average, approximately middle 50% of their students fall within that range. And you want them, because we want students to get into school, we don't want them to get tons of rejections. They're putting in a lot of effort for these applications. Our goal is that they're getting into a majority of the schools. You want your student to work on their college essays and supplements. There are schools that have, I can tell you that there are schools that have 3 or 4 essays. So there's one main essay that you write that pretty much goes to every school. And then there's multiple supplemental questions that colleges will ask that will range from 50 words all the way to 500, 600, 700 words. So it's really important to start working on that. I usually tell students, try to start working on their main essay in August before school starts. Kind of the sooner you can do that, the better, just to kind of get one big one off your plate. Make sure that your student is creating a schedule of deadlines, especially, well, with this year, what a mess. But what I would recommend is create a schedule of deadlines, which applications are November 1st, which is one of the biggest deadline dates for the season, and just so you have an idea to keep yourself on track. If you have an applications due in January, there's no reason to start that in October. Focus on what's right in front of you. That's where your students are going to be at. It's really hard for them to see long-term with this. So creating a schedule is going to be really helpful to avoid significant stress along the way. And at no point should you be stopping exploring academic and career interests. So whether it's taking on the leadership role, trying out a new club in senior year, getting a job if you're finally able to find one, just consistently do things that are going to solidify your interest. Or if you're like many students who go, I'm not sure what I want to study, just keep using the time that you have outside of school to keep exploring. And then finally, applying for financial aid and scholarships. The financial aid process can be a little bit daunting when you're dealing with scholarships and trying to apply for private scholarships. I think the average is, they say that each year more than $250 million is left on the table of scholarship money that's out there that is not collected because students don't go ahead and apply. It's not about finding the $25,000 scholarship or $50,000. Sometimes it's looking at the $500 ones and start collecting them. A lot of times they require small applications and small essays, but you know what? You can always use an essay that you're using for school, for college, and potentially also use it for scholarships as well. And applying for financial aid is just important. There is the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. That is the government's application to determine if you qualify for financial aid from the government, and then the colleges and universities will use it to determine if you get institutional aid. And they'll bundle all of that together to help reduce the cost of education. That application does not open up until October of your student's senior year. But it's a really important thing to get a good handle of. You just need to have what's called prior year taxes. So for example, the upcoming class who's applying to college now, the 12th graders, they're applying for fall 2021. Their parents need to have their tax returns from 2019 to fill out the FAFSA. So you need to just know that if you are applying for financial aid for 2022, then you'll need your 2020 taxes in order to file the year your student becomes a senior. So it's just important to kind of keep in mind that these 6 different things I'm talking about are really what you want to focus on in the first couple of months of the senior year. Okay. And then with that, that's kind of where I wanted to do more of like a brief, even though it's never brief, summary of everything. And just now give everyone an opportunity if there's any more questions. I'm happy to answer it. Like I said before, though, I'm Dana Ponsky, and you can find me at consultwithdana.com, and then there's my email address and phone number. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm kind of always around, not going anywhere. So, but yeah, I'm happy to do like an initial, I do a 15-minute initial free call. And then if you want, more services, I make things very customized for families. I think that that's kind of what our time now dictates. So I work on an individualized basis with students to create a program that works best for them, as opposed to just say, this is how we do it for everyone. So I think that's important, trying to make sure that families' needs are being met at this particular time, because it's a little crazy out there if you haven't noticed.
Oh yeah,
So,
for sure.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What are schools using if they're not using the SAT or ACT? What are you finding is sort of replacing that? Would it be the grades, or would it be just, are they just using sort of measures that you're already talking about, or do you find now they're asking for something different?
I think it's not that they're asking for something different. I think schools, the word though you'll see consistently is, we look at students holistically. Mm-hmm. They're going to look at grades, but they're going to look at extracurricular activities, letters of recommendation. They're going to look at essays. I think they're going to be looking at the essays to really get a much better sense of who the student is from the student's point of view. I think that there's been, there's schools now that I know of, one school that has not eliminated, they've gone test optional with testing. If you click the button on the application that you're test optional, all of a sudden it populates 3 essay questions you have to answer. So it's 3 250-word essays. Admittedly, one of my students canned that school pretty quick because he's like, I can't write 3 more essays right now. But that's what some schools are doing, is they're saying, we're not using this, but we do want to learn more about the student, and here are some interesting questions we would like to ask. And sometimes those questions are, tell us about the best day of your life. They just want to know interesting things about you. Sometimes schools will ask short, questions that maybe just be 1 or 2 lines. Somebody was like, what is your favorite song and why? If you could go anywhere for a day, where would it be? What is your most interesting fact that you know? These are just kind of giving windows into the soul of the student. And so I think that you're going to find that if a school is not going to use testing, I think they're going to be focusing obviously a lot on the grades, but I think also on the writing, and really trying to get into who the student is as a person.
Makes sense. It sounds like writing is really important to develop in these years, and
Yes.
speaking like almost like the voice, you're getting your voice. We do a lot of that work. It's so
Yeah.
important, but yeah.
It would be nice if college essay writing was some way like any academic writing. It is not. It has nothing. It couldn't be any different. So hopefully high schools will begin adapting and incorporate more personal narrative writing into their curriculum to help students, as colleges probably put more emphasis on this. But we need to this transactionary writing that we do in school right now is great for exams, but we need something a little bit better for writing a college essay.
Makes really good sense. Well, I think we had a great Q&A going during everything. So I think
Yes.
we're kind of exhausted that at this moment. So I
Perfect.
guess we'll sort of call it a day. And I thank you
You.
so much, Dana, for being with us. And thank you so
Welcome.
much for
Thank
sharing
you.
your wisdom with us. And it's always a pleasure. So thanks again. And everyone
Thank you.
have a very good night. Thank you for joining us.